name is Jenelle Riley. I'm your host for today's Half Hour with Apples Never Fall. Please join me in welcoming today's guest. She is the showrunner, writer, and executive producer. Please welcome Melanie Marnich. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, I always like to ask if people can give sort of an overview of the series in their own words.
Oh, that's a big question. That's always a big question. It's about a woman named Joy Delaney, who her and her husband Stan believe they're entering the best part of their life with retirement. And they look forward to the love and companionship of their children. And retirement doesn't turn out like that at all. And sort of in this gaping silence, Joy feels neglected by her family, and into that vacuum comes what we're just going to call an agent of chaos. And soon after, Joy goes missing, and the lens of suspicion is cast upon her husband, upon her whole family, and everybody finds out that they never really knew each other like they thought they did.
Why don't we take a look at the trailer?
Okay.
Friends, you're the ones who made Delaney Academy a real success. It was our life. And to our kids, now I get to make up for that lost time.
Happy retirement, Mom and Dad.
We love you!
You can spend a lifetime with someone as a wife or as a mother, but you can never really know who they are.
You've reached Joy Delaney. Leave a message and I'll call you back. Mailbox full. Goodbye.
Something bad has happened to Mom. I've left 5 messages. If she's not returning our calls or texts, it's because she can't.
Pain is at my window.
Joy Delaney, mother of 4, has gone missing.
The storm is at my door.
What are you doing in Mom's room?
Hey, it's Logan. We need to talk.
You take my love away.
You're not gonna believe this.
I have a confessional. You were an emotional chaos sinkhole, Amy, and I'm sick of it!
Here we go. Strap in.
Nobody can break your heart like your own children.
Stop the bleeding. How do I stop repeating?
What can you tell us about her?
She will come back.
And where is she? I said to my parents, don't trust her. They wouldn't listen.
Thank you. Please help me.
You think we're this, big, happy family?
Stan Delaney, did you kill your wife?
There's a violence in all of you.
Secrets will poison any family. And what you don't know can hurt you.
So this series is based on the novel by Liane Moriarty. Can I ask how the book first found its way to you and what interested you in adapting it as a limited series?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It first reached me, I believe, in galley form. It was not yet published. And I just had to kind of clear the decks for a bit. I've been busy for several years, just nonstop. And I had told my agent, I said, I need just a bit of a breath to hear myself think again and to really, think about what I want to do next. And I maybe got 2 weeks of clearing the decks. And she's like, I found something. And she sent this to me. And David Heyman, the producer, had the rights to it. She's like, you have to read this. And I immediately fell in love. I'm a fan of Liane Moriarty's. I think she's just a genius. But this book particularly, I think what I liked about it is that the family was so relatable, they were so, I don't know. I just felt like it was a family we could know. There were frustrations we could know, even though it was all very special and set in, well, the book was set in Sydney, but I was imagining it in the US. And I thought it was really masterfully done in terms of how it juggled the mystery, the harrowing mystery with the humor and with the love and with the tonal complexity of it was something that I always look for. And the moral complexity of it. I was how these contradictory emotions of love and resentment, anger and patience, everything can all coexist in one thing. And and that it is actually, it all equals something very honest, which is a story about what it is to be a family, what it is to be in a marriage, what it is to be a mother. And so I immediately was just like, I couldn't stop turning the pages. And I also love the way the book, Leon, built in these really just deep and powerful themes of love and marriage and what it takes to maintain a marriage, what it takes to raise a family. And she kind of took the gloves off. And so I just really, I don't know, it felt like it had all the ingredients, for something I was looking to do, sort of my next project, at that time, the next thing. And I couldn't resist it. That was fantastic.
Forgive me for not knowing, but being familiar with your other work, have you done a novel adaptation before, or is this your first time adapting existing material?
No, it's the first, I think it's the first time. I have another one in the works that I was working on at the same time I was doing this pilot. So oddly, my 2 novel adaptations happened at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
In some ways that presents, some kind of cool opportunities when you have existing source material. But what were, in addition to sort of the good, but what were the challenges of adapting a book like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of one and the same because this book is like, it has so much, it's so rich in terms of character. But in the book, a lot of the character stuff comes out in terms of backstory, in terms of just diving into their internal lives, their internal monologues. So I read it and I was like, oh, this won't be a problem. There's so much going on. And there is. And then when I reread it, when I got the project, I was like, okay, a lot of that is internal. A lot of that is never acted upon. It's just what we, the reader, know. So the big challenge was taking those incredibly rich characters, their psyches and their damage and their wounds and their histories, and figuring out how to externalize it and make it here and now and dramatize it and, put all that internal stuff, basically on the table and turn it into story. So that was the biggest challenge. I think it was very fun. It's like a puzzle piece, trying to figure out, like, kind of mining and trying to figure out which gems you want to pull forward are. And so that was fun and tough.
Is that now, because I haven't read the book, but I have a lot of friends who have, and I don't think it's done this way in the book, where like each character sort of gets their own episode. How did you sort of land upon that decision?
Yeah, kind of joined to this other topic of like, how do you, what's the change you make in the book, like from going from that internal stuff to externalizing it, realizing these characters were so rich and had so much to offer that, and there were so many of them, there's 6 Delaneys, to try and address and tell everybody's story a little bit in every episode would have kind of meant nothing. Each character deserved a deep dive. The Delaneys themselves get episode 1, that's that deep dive. And then it's every character gets their own episode. And it really was about being able to say, how do we plumb the story of each character in a way that matters, that lets the audience connect with them, that lets the audience spend time with them and invest, and also that lets, in Joy's absence, each character kind of undergoes their own catharsis or exorcism almost of their wounds and their angers or whatever it may be. And that took time and it took focus. So thus, everybody gets their own episode.
Did you hit upon that idea pretty early, or was it like something that came to you later and you were like, the solution to all my problems?
What was tricky was saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. But then it was in what order? Because it could kind of be it was like, how are we going to, what's the most powerful stacking of this, So that was part of that decision-making process as well. How does one character's catharsis lead to another, to another, to another, and the aggregate adding up to something else altogether?
I love how this show balances being a thriller and a character study, really 6 character studies, a family drama, but it's also really funny. Can you talk about sort of combining all those tones and finding the humor in a story that's often very tense?
Well, thank you for thinking it's funny. I think that was really important. The book is funny, and so it was definitely important to convey and translate that spirit. What was tricky was, at its heart, it is a character drama, but also it has this very terrifying thing of this woman goes missing and they don't know what happened. And so I was very cognizant of, my writers in the writers' room were all very cognizant of, you have to treat that quite respectfully, and you can't have a joke next to that. Like there's no way you can have a punchline next to that very real, harrowing and terrifying thing. But what is true is you can have wit, and that these characters themselves have humor. These characters themselves come into the room with Troy's irritated at Logan, Logan's irritated at Amy, Amy's irritated at Brooke. You know, the family dynamic could be just rich with humor. And so we, you know, it was just a priority to make sure people laughed and that it felt warm and accessible. And it was sort of a point of entry, the humor, you know, it's like it lets you into the world differently. But it was literally a decision to not have jokes, because that felt, yeah, that felt disrespectful of the story of Joy, you know? And so there were times where we would kind of look at something and be like, oh God, that's really funny. And we're like, is it too funny? And sometimes we pull back, you know? And then, but what was also delightful is when you have funny actors like we had, they know how to come into the room, and the way Troy looks at somebody or the way Amy reacts to somebody is funny, you know, but it's funny in an authentic way, not a joke setup punchline. Yeah, kind of way.
We have to talk about this amazing cast. But before we do, let's take a look at another clip. I think this is one between Annette Bening as Joy and Georgia Flood as the mysterious Savannah.
Right.
Here's the thing no one tells you about marriage, about family. How much you can resent the people you love for everything you had to give up for them, and there's never even a thank you. You just give it all up because that's what having a family demands of a woman. And then you wake up one day and you realize the person that you were meant to be is gone. You gave her up for people who don't even see you. And there's no time to grieve her because there's too much damn laundry. You just wake up one day and you realize that half of you, maybe the best part of you, is dead. And you take it for granted that when push comes to shove, your sacrifices will be remembered and appreciated, and the people closest to you will show you some grace when you need it, and then they don't. Something broke between me and Stan.
I mean, Annette Bening, it doesn't get any better than that.
She's a goddess. She's a goddess. Yeah.
And when you hear she's, you know, I don't know if, I think there can be a danger with writing with certain actors in mind in case you don't get them. But when you hear Annette Bening is going to be saying your words, what's your reaction?
It's so overwhelming, you almost have to put it out of your head. Because she's a treasure. I mean, she's such an artist. She's such a generous artist. She has, you know, she comes to this with such integrity, preparation. It was a thrill. I mean, talk about something that is literally a dream come true. Yeah.
And I have to imagine with actors like her and Sam Neill, they probably bring things to the table that maybe you didn't expect that are, you know, pleasant surprises.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, because they inhabit their characters and they do such preparation and they take it so to heart and so personally that it was always thrilling to talk to both of them. And particularly early on, Annette was the first person we cast. And as she got into the skin of Joy, as she slipped into that, her questions about the character really informed things. Just in terms of how grounded it needed to be, how real, because she herself needed to know it was it had to be real for the character. And it was just so, it was really an honor to go through that process with those two actors, you know?
In addition to actors like Annette and Sam and Alison Brie and Jake Lacy, there's some people that I'm not as familiar with, like Essie Randles and Georgia Flood, who plays Savannah. Can you talk about how you sort of rounded out this fantastic cast? And you mentioned Annette was first, so I imagine things had to fall into place around that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you get Annette Bening, and it's like, okay, who could be her husband? You know, like who can go toe to toe? You know, and so right there, you're in a certain echelon of who you're going to for actors. And Sam Neill's name came up, and found the power, Stan's power and his anger and his potential for violence in different ways that I think made it so deep and so nuanced, you know? So then you have those two absolute aces in those roles, and it's like, who are their kids? Who can go toe to toe with these parents, you know? And I of course knew of Jake, and of course knew of Alison, and again, longtime fans of both of them. And they were like, I was like, okay, they actually could be siblings. That's interesting. Like when you look at them, you're like, I can buy this. And then the Australian actors, Conor, Essie, and Georgia, were discoveries for us. We did not know of them right away. And when we saw them, every one of them, trying to think back, it's been a hot minute now, just leapt off the screen for us in their auditions and leapt off the Zoom for us. They were, again, so authentic and brought such heart, and they felt already so much like those characters. And we really were like, okay, let's picture all these people together, particularly the Delaney family. I'm like, yeah, I buy them as a family. I just buy them. And they really became one, both on camera and off camera. They became incredibly close. And then Georgia Flood, that role was quite tricky to cast because you have to believe this person is both vulnerable and dangerous. And that's really hard to convey. And she did it, but that was a tough one, and I feel lucky that we found her.
I mean, especially when casting this family, I always think it's a little strange when you put a bunch of actors in a room and say, act like you've known each other your whole lives. Did you find that chemistry was pretty instantaneous? Do you know if they sort of like had to work on that? Did they get to spend time together?
Well, we shot in Australia, so that helped everybody get close. I mean, we were all living there together, we bonded there, but they themselves, one thing the director and I did right away when the Delaney's were all cast was ask them to start a sibling text chain. And they dove in. And I am not privy to it, but I think it was quite funny and wonderful. And I think they became siblings. And I think at one point, maybe Annette and Sam wanted to be a part of it. So there's a mom and dad and sibling text chain. And then they had to like start another separate sibling text chain that did include mom and dad. And they kind of got that vibe. They got it going. And I think it's one thing that really delights me when I look at the show is they were all stupendous, from the start. But I do feel as the show continues, you see them as humans knowing each other more, growing closer, and it just infuses the performances in the loveliest way to make, a dinner scene or a conversation or the way they walk into a room together feel really lived in and really real. And that's all them.
This may sound like a strange question, but again, Georgia Flood, for me, at least, is such a discovery. But you're asking her to go toe to toe against some pretty, great actors. Was there any kind of like a chemistry read with her and Annette?
I keep kind of pinching myself because when I look back, I'm like, wow, that all kind of fell into place with a lot of work. It fell into place, but no, I mean, I felt like when we found the person who was right, it worked, it felt quite charmed.
I feel like I read somewhere that you really wanted Annette. I mean, obviously, we understand why, that you sort of, manifested it. What was it about her that again, having seen it, it seems obvious, but why did you know she was so right for Joy?
For me, it was really important that Joy have a power and an integrity and a real authenticity, be able to convey love and frustration with the same look. She had to feel powerful. There were so many contradictions in that character that, you need someone who can contain all that and just render it so deftly. I just think Annette's an incredible artist. I think she's one of our greatest. And there's just something very real about her while also I think she's very relatable. She's both somebody you want to be and somebody you want to be friends with.
Yeah. Something I always like to ask writers, especially when doing an adaptation, do you ever struggle with writer's block? And if so, how do you sort of push through that?
The great thing about TV is the deadlines. So I think for me, those help me circumnavigate a writer's block. I didn't get writer's block. Sometimes it's almost the opposite, the overwhelm of all the work, and wanting to make sure you give every moment the time it deserves. So it's writer's inundation is more like it. But yeah, so the writer's block hasn't been a problem. For this, I would say there wasn't a block. There was always the yearning to deliver on the promise of the book and to also create scripts that were up to these actors. You know, these actors are extraordinary, and I wanted to make sure that every one of them had a journey and scenes and conflicts, you know, that were really worthy of them, and I wanted them to shine, and I was very aware of making sure they each had the chance.
For you, and this can be from a writing standpoint, from a producing standpoint, and since the whole series is now available on Peacock, I feel like we can get a little into spoiler territory.
Right.
What was the biggest challenge of the series? If there was a particular scene, sometimes it's, you know, something like you're shooting on location and or you can't find the right car, or there's a hard role to cast.
Biggest challenge. Honestly, we shot in Australia, which was fantastic. I can't say that that was a challenge, but there were things like you can say, oh, it looks like Florida. It doesn't. There was a lot of work to be done to make it look like there was no work being done. You know, you can look at that tennis court and go, well, of course, those trees are all in Australia. Yeah, they weren't there. We brought everything in to make it look like that, you know, and it was just like we had an incredible production designer, Tony Fanning, who was relentless in the pursuit of accuracy. And so there's just, I think, you know, when you shoot elsewhere, that sort of relentlessness that you have to use at all times. Like, you know, are the light switches the right light switches? The stripes of the lines on the road look different. You know, like you can't let up ever. And we had the crews and the artists there that delivered it beautifully. I think the creative challenge was knowing how to end it.
Got to stick that landing.
Yeah, was knowing how to end it. And it changed. I did a rewrite. I co-wrote the finale with a wonderful writer named Elijah Baraz. And after the strikes, I rewrote a chunk of the finale because I learned stuff in production, and I learned about the Delaneys. I learned how they felt, and it was an interesting, yeah, it ends differently now than it did before.
Really? Would you be willing to talk about the original ending or just read the book?
Yeah. Originally, it went on longer. It was more about will mom stay or won't she, and what makes her stay. And that was really lovely. But coming back after the strikes and then reading the script and having gotten to know the Delaneys, you know, over all the months of previous shooting, I was like, those kids aren't giving her that time.
Right.
They're gonna want to know what's up, you know? And so that was, it felt, having shot however many episodes we shot before the strikes, like an adjustment needed to be made that sort of was part of the energy that I already knew had been established, you know, and the momentum of the storytelling, the emotional velocity of these kids. They are athletes, they are competitors. They're not going to be like, take your time. They're
Right.
like, what did you do? Was like, what are you thinking? And that sort of heat when Joy comes home was new, you know, and them holding her feet literally to the fire.
Something I love about this show is at different times, I think I relate to every single character. Sometimes I'm Joy, sometimes I'm Troy, sometimes I'm Brooke. Was there one character that you related to the most?
Oddly enough, I think Troy.
No, I get that. I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I relate to, yeah, a lot.
He has a line, I think, in the very first episode where he kind of tells his brother, like, we had a different dad.
Yeah.
Like, the you got was not the dad I got.
Yeah. I don't have siblings, and so I'm obsessed with siblings. And I one of the writers in my room, I think, was quoting someone or something about every child in a family has a different set of parents because of depending on the birth order. And I thought that was so fascinating. We used it in the show, you know, every one of those kids had a different stand. Joy. And that's really potent. I think it's really, yeah, powerful.
How great was it, though, to bring a character like Joy to the big screen who, you know, gets to be complicated and gets to actually say, like, you know, sometimes my family makes me crazy.
I loved, that was one of the things, I think, going back to maybe it was your first question, like what drew me to the book, which was the theme in there that two contradictory things can be true and are in love, that love isn't always love. And I think there's a line in the book, I'm going to slaughter it, but it was like Stan Delaney killed his wife, Stan Delaney loved his wife. Both things can be true.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was so powerful, and I think it was uttered by the detective or something in the book. And there was like a moment in the book where Stan knows Joy has fallen out of love with him, and he knows she'll come back, and so he'll wait. And I'm like, oh, like that love has these powerful ebbs and flows, and that, yeah, I just think that's very honest.
I was so impressed by the way he just knew she was coming back. He wasn't worried, you know, and I
Yeah.
get that.
I know, until he got worried. But it's yeah, and because he knew what, his part in that. And that's part of the mystery of the show, the revealing of that, the slow reveal of that. But I think, yeah, from the book and hopefully in the show, that idea that contradictory things can be held at the same time.
Well, we always like to close by asking, and in case someone hasn't had a chance to see Apples Never Fall, is there one thing about this limited series that stands out for you that would make someone want to drop everything and check it out?
I always said in the writer's room, and it was something we all adhered to, that we wanted to make sure the audience, we knew we would have done our jobs. The audience laughed, cried, clutched their pearls, and called their moms. And I hope people can watch it and see truths about life and themselves and really connect. And also that they go, oh my God, I should thank my mother. I really should. I think it sort of opens something important up there.
Yeah. It does such a good job of also capturing like the invisible labor.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
really important to us. And, and to Annette, we talked a lot about that and what women just do. You can say, oh yeah, my husband went out to pick up dinner, but I put the order in. I thought to get it's like, and women with children, like how much women carry that it is just taken for granted. And Joy is really the embodiment of that.
Absolutely. Well, again, I want to say thanks to our friends at Peacock and to Melanie for joining us today, and to everyone watching. Thank you so much for joining us today for this half hour with.
This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.